Hey everyone, welcome to Buzzing About Romance. I am Becky, and I am so excited that on this episode of Buzzing About Romance, we are sitting down and talking with literary agent Stephanie Phillips from SBR Media. Stephanie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Becky. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining me. Before we hopped on here for this recording, we talked about what inspired this episode, and really our community of listeners are just intrigued by some of the interworkings of publishing. So we are here to deliver. I'm going to tell everybody a little bit about what SBR Media is, and then your bio, and then we'll get into some basics.
Okay.
So SBR Media is a literary agency for all genres. And Stephanie Phillips is a born and bred Southern girl. After graduating from High Point University, she'd gone from different careers, including modeling, Mary Kay, publicist, blogger, radio show host, and then found her footing as an agent. With over 30 clients and even several deals in her first year with SBR Media, she looks forward to seeing what else she and her clients can accomplish. And when not agenting, hosting, blogging, or reading, she spends time with her husband and two adorable kids in their Myrtle Beach home. Again, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. As you're reading that, I'm like, oh gosh, I need to update my bio.
I just stole it off your website, but I will link all of your socials and stuff like that in our on the shelf show notes so everybody can find your blog and stuff. So let's get to know a little bit about you, Stephanie, before we get into the nitty gritty of being an agent. So are you a lifelong reader, or is reading something that you came into as an adult?
Yes, I'm a lifelong reader. And that's almost literally lifelong. I started reading at the age of 2, like not like books, obviously books, but like I could point out words and like on pages, and then I was reading books by the time I was in kindergarten. And so much my teacher had to put me and another girl in my kindergarten class. Well, it happened for the first 3 years for kindergarten, first, second grade. I had to sit in the hallway during reading time because we were reading like well above everybody else.
Yeah.
And in our grades, because we just fell in love with reading beforehand. But my mom, I get it kind of honest, I guess. She's a reader, but she's retired now, but was an elementary school teacher. So I guess she kind of really fostered that.
No, it's the same. My mother was a teacher, also early reader, lifelong reader. Like, I can remember growing up and we would be headed out somewhere, like even if it was just to dinner or to run errands, you were told to grab a book. And I was one of 4 children. And if whoever was going, you were told, grab a book and get in the car. So we never went anywhere without books. Like, yes.
Yes, I think that's the only way my mom could actually really find something to punish me with, was to make me do something without reading, because I was always in a book. Even now, like if I'm really intrigued and, like invested in the story that I'm reading, my husband's driving wherever and I'm like reading, and they'll just talk to me in the car and I just look at them like, what is wrong with you? Do you not see I'm
Right? Nope, I'm the same. And it's really cool because I have a child. She's a huge reader, and I have had to at times threaten to take her books away so that she will do what she is supposed to be doing.
Isn't that terrible? I mean, it's not terrible, but it's terrible because
like, listen, I really need you to do your chemistry or your calculus, so give me that book.
Right, exactly. Just put on pause for like 30 minutes and then you can have it back.
But I get it. And, you hear all the time, like, how do you read so many books? How do you read so many books? I don't watch TV.
Yeah, I don't either. And that's a detriment to my career. I mean, it's really bad because people will say, well, what does it compare to? I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but we have a few clients that are right now in the process of books to film, and the producers are like, well, what kind of shows do you think this compares to? What kind of writers should we be? And I'm like, That's your job. I don't know. Like I don't watch TV. I have no idea. Like I have no idea what movie was the last one I saw in theater. It had to have been something with my kids. Oh, the Addams Family, the newest Addams Family movie, not the Wednesday the show, but the
Yeah.
newest Addams. So that was probably like 3 or 4 years ago, maybe more than that.
I
I
haven't
don't
been
even.
to the movies since before the pandemic, so
I
since
just
before
yeah,
2020. So
me
yes,
neither.
I totally get it.
I just am not. Just give me my Kindle and I'll.
Yes, same, same. Um, so do you have a favorite subgenre or favorite genre that you like to read within?
I read mostly paranormal romance is my favorite. And then to right behind that, like snuggled up to it, is fantasy romance, urban fantasy. Um, but I like suspense, mystery, thriller. I'm not a historical romance reader. I read those when I was in middle school. I have my field historical romance. And then my daughter is actually named by after a historical romance character. And then
Who is she named after? I have to know.
uh her name, so the book is called Midsummer's Eve by Philippa Carr,
Okay.
and my daughter's name is Honora. But I spell it the Hebrew version instead of the English version,
Okay.
which
I
just means that add an H at the end.
I didn't so I don't read much historical anymore either. And like you, I started reading historical in middle school, probably
Mhm.
way younger than I needed to. Like, 1990, I'm picking up my first Jude Devereaux. Um, and my my mother had a connection to Jude. They went to college together and sorority sisters. So that's she was always giving my mom books. And I went through a stage where all I read was historical. And then we talked about it a little bit before, but kind of 50 Shades of Grey. And I was limited to what, for 7 years, I couldn't afford to buy a book. So I was limited to what was in my library. And so I slowly made the change over to contemporary. And now I have a hard time flipping back to historical. You
Oh
know,
yes.
it doesn't always work. I get a little too caught up in the bathing hygiene.
It's
I
yeah. It's really, really hard. And you know what? I This is bad too. Like I don't know if you've ever heard of Vanessa Vale. She writes a lot of menage. And
yes.
I picked up one of her series. Just maybe the book was free, the first one or something, or maybe it was on sale. I don't know. But anyway, I was reading the thing. I started reading it, had no freaking clue it was a historical romance until I got like 10 pages into the book and I'm like, dag nabbit.
We did a happy hour with Vanessa. She is like a delightful human. She has a new small town series that she has in Montana. It's called Manhunt was the first book.
Uh-huh.
Super steamy, super sexy, instant love, which I'm a fool for instant love. Highly recommend that series. Um, so tell us, how did you become a literary agent? Because it's not every day that people like say, "Hey, I want to grow up and be a literary agent. I'm going to buy books."
Yes, exactly. Well, I was telling Becky before the show started that this is kind of something that I really like fell into. It was not something that I ever planned or even thought about doing, like never in a million years. So I started a review blog about 10 years ago, and then about 8 years ago, so I guess 2 years after I opened my blog, I was approached by a publishing house out of Seattle, Washington, asking me if I wanted to come to work for them. And so I was like, yeah, sure. I mean, working with books for a living, heck yeah. And I didn't have to move to Seattle. I could remote work. So that was even better. And then about 9 months into that job, they decided they were going to close. And a couple of my authors came to me and was like, you're already doing the work for the most part. Why don't you just come? Why don't you be our agent? So I guess they say the rest is history. I did some research on what it took to be an agent, and really I was doing pretty much everything an agent does at that time, except for I wasn't soliciting other publishing houses because I was already at a publisher, right? And so I knew I didn't really want to do publicity. I mean, I had tried my hand at that a little bit with my blog, hosting blog tours and doing those kind of things. And I just felt like that was not my calling. And so when the opportunity came up to um open SBR Media or to start this company, I talked to several of my friends and I was like, what do you think? That are also authors who are also on my client list, by the way. But I'm like, what do you think about this? Do you think it's doable? Would you be my client if I even started the company? And they were like, of course, hello, like that was not a no-brainer. But the funny thing is that they haven't written since I opened the business. So I guess catch 22 on that one. But it's a lot. I mean, I love it. It is so much fun. It's very rewarding in that you help authors achieve their dreams, but you don't have like I am not an editorial agent. So I don't there are a lot of them that are out there, that will edit their authors' books before they send them out on submission and stuff. That is not my forte. That's not me. And I can help with development, like if you need character development, finding plot holes or that kind of thing. I'm your girl. But don't ask me about the difference between a regular comma and an Oxford comma. I have no freaking clue, and I don't never learn it because it's just not my
Yeah.
shtick. It's not my thing. Everybody has their spot, right? And but anyway, it's just I have like we were talking about with the bio, I have 57 clients actually, and I represent 2 publishing houses in addition to those clients. We have 8 other agents besides me, or I have 8 other agents besides me in the company, and we top over 200 authors that we represent now.
Yeah, I looked through your list of authors and there are several. One of the ones that stood out to me was Bella J. I recently just found her. Everybody in the podcast community is calling it my dark era. I've been a little deep in the mafia world, and I just read her. It's Alexius is her. It's a trilogy. It was delightful. It was a little bonkers. It was super sexy. And I kept talking about it, and our community kept reading it. And they're like, what are we reading? I'm like, listen, just keep reading. And I rage read it a little bit because I didn't know it was a trilogy when I started. Anyway, but you have a phenomenal list of clients, and it's a diverse list too, which I think is amazing that you have some rom-com type authors. I saw you had S.E. Rose was on your list, and so she writes a little bit more steamy emotional romances. So it's great. You have a huge variety.
Yes, right. We have Jen Sterling. I don't know if you've ever read Jen,
Yep.
but she
Baseball.
yes, that's her big claim to fame is her baseball series. And then we have we go from there to Lily White, who is my darkest dark author. I don't know if you've ever read her, but if you
No, but
like
I'm
dark,
putting it on my list.
yes, it is a lot. So quite a few psychological thrillers that are dark. I mean, like if you have triggers, you best be watching yourself because she'll hit them right smack in the face. But it's freaking phenomenal. I will tell you that her writing is amazing. And I'm not saying that just because she's my author, but her writing really is amazing. And she doesn't gloss over really anything. But it's kind of like there's a couple of her books that you're like, what just happened here? What?
Yeah, but I like that. I like when I kind of get oh, okay, we're going there. Okay, I'm in. Buckle up.
Yeah.
It's going to be a wild ride.
Yes. So if you need some recommendations on where to start with her stuff, you just let me know.
I'll
I'll
happily
help
let
you
you
out
know.
on that one. There's a couple of books that she has. So one of them that starts a series you cannot get on Amazon. It was banned because it has non-con in the first 10%. And so you can only get that on her website. It's called Her Master's Courtesan. And then she has a book that she never published on anywhere but her website, and that one is completely non-con. It's terrible. I mean, it's a great book, but it's a doozy.
Well, we went through this little rabbit hole of like dark non-con dub con novellas. I think it was last year, and I had the famous quote that hell had more plot than heaven. And since then, everyone is always like, Becky, how's hell? And I'm like, much more plot. It's where I'm going.
Yes,
They all like
that
to
one
give
is
me a hard
pretty
time for
bad.
that.
That one is pretty bad. I mean, if you like murder and sex mixed in, you'll be
Hey,
right on point.
not every book
But
is for everybody, but there is a book for
that's
everyone. So
that's exactly right. Yes, and then we have I have a thriller author that she doesn't write romance anymore, but she has a phenomenal, gosh. Of course I'm going to say all of my people have phenomenal stuff, right? Under a pen name she has this awesome legal uh romantic suspense book.
hmm
The girl is being the female, the books are told out of her POV, but there's a couple of chapters that switches to the guys and she's being stalked. And she falls for this wealthy, she's an attorney. She falls for this wealthy billionaire that's a client of her firm, but not her client. And anyway, like she's being stalked and so in between trying to save her life, she's also falling in love. So
I like a good stalking though. Like I am on board for a good stalking. Um, I also like to stalk my fictional characters and some authors.
yeah,
But not in a
very good.
creepy like I'm coming to your house way. In a I must know where all your books are and how I can get them
Right.
kind of way.
Yes. That one is on Amazon. And we have a lot of MC too, and some Mafia, and we have some BDSM. We have some contemporary.
Yeah. You have a
We have
great
some.
client list. Like I
Mhm.
was going through it and I had read quite a few. So that was a bonus. But so you have clients.
Mhm.
When does an author come to you? When do they say, "Hey, I need an agent. I need to hire and engage this person"? Should this be something they do at the beginning of their career? Is this something they tend to do in the middle of their career as they're picking up momentum? When do people get agents?
Well, it depends on what kind of author career they want to have, really. Like if you want a traditional career, meaning you want to start at a traditional publishing house, 99.9% of the time you have to have an agent because most of the publishing houses will not take unsolicited, what they call unsolicited um, submissions, which means it hasn't been requested by them from an editor to the author directly, or it didn't come from an agent. And so you have to have an agent in order to submit to the majority of traditional publishers. So if you want to go that route, then you have to find an agent on the onset. If you are a self-published author, you can come anytime. To an agent and say, if your sales are doing really well. Now, a lot of times I will say that a lot of times for the self-published author, a lot of the deals that we can do are based upon sales and ranking, which ranking is based on sales. So that's the key there. If a self-published author is doing really, really well, they have really good releases, then people are going to start finding them. And not a lot of times it rarely does it happen on the onset, with your very first novel. There's been a handful,
Right.
but rarely, out of those thousands of authors that we have that now, rarely does one blow up on their debut novel. It can happen, but it rarely. So when you start to move to like mid list, or you start to get like contacted by publishers wanting rights to your, either be it audio or foreign to your work, then you can submit to an agent to see if they will help you walk through that process and take care of it for you, um or handle it yourself. But if you handle it yourself, I highly recommend you get an attorney to look at the contracts
Yeah.
for you. And though, yes, it might cost you a penny, but it might save you way more in the long run. Um, because sometimes you might get yourself in a pickle if you don't know what you're looking
Right.
for.
Right. Okay. So, what is one thing you wish all authors knew about getting an agent? So, I'll tell you, I once was in a writing class, and this author, he was very anti indie author. And he made a statement that one, like authors, you never pay to even have an agent look at your script, like look at your novel. That you
That's
shouldn't
true.
pay.
You don't.
Um, and also, if you go to their website, make sure that they represent people that write similar to you. Like
Hmm.
those were his two things. And he basically said you couldn't be a successful author doing it on your, like, being an indie author, publishing yourself. You had to be with a pub. A little
That's
arrogant,
Yeah. Well, it's
old
a
school
lot a
mentality.
lot of traditional authors feel that way. Unless they do the hybrid model, which is you have some indie, some trad, but a lot of those that are what you would say old school, authors feel that way. There are a lot of readers that feel that way, that are old school, kind of what you would, I guess, call them readers, that are, I only want to read people that are New York Times bestsellers. I only want to read people that are in a bookstore. I only want to read people that have, sold X amount of copies. I only want whoever's been reviewed by XYZ, or Oprah's book club or whatever, those kind of things. And Reese Witherspoon, now her book club is huge. Jenna Bush, whatever her married name is. Now I
Hager,
can't remember
Hager, Hager. I
um,
think it's Hager.
whatever. Yeah. Like, it has to be reviewed by somebody, in order for them to read it or else they won't. That there's always going to be those kinds of opinions. And take her to leave it. Like I have clients for both and I don't sway either way in that kind of argument because not traditional is not for everybody.
No, it's
And not
not. Yeah.
everybody can write traditional type books. So, yeah, the market would be a lot slimmer if we didn't have indie authors and everybody still had to submit their books to publishing houses. But then we wouldn't have some of these quite fabulous stories that we have on the market that we love to read,
Well, and as we're seeing, and that's part of what inspired this episode, is that we're seeing traditional pub coming and buying some of these indie authors. Like Ruby Dixon, I had done some work for her. I've worked, I've read all of her books. And then here we are in 2019, 2020, and Penguin Random House is saying, hey, can we distro your paperbacks for you? We hear these blue aliens are phenomenal. And um, so, I think the rules are changing a little bit. I also think personally, we're seeing, I call it the trad pub sheen. So I like my book spicier. And as someone who read in the 80s and the 90s, market paperback historical romances, those were pretty spicy
Mhm.
compared to what is being
What
put
they are now.
out
Mhm.
currently. And so I think that there's a division in the market a little bit. I think we get a more fuller, complex, sexually forward story in the indie market or even in the hybrid market
Mhm.
versus full on traditional. I think those sometimes they're edited to be like tepid bathwater, in my
Yes,
opinion.
they are. They are.
But those books are for people, they're just not for my people.
Right. And I had an author duo. They co-write together under one name joined. It's two authors writing as one. And their first like six books they self-published and then they got picked up by I can't remember who their first publisher was, but then they got picked up by Penguin Random House after that, and then now they're published by Waterhouse. Well, anyway, their indie books are way spicier. And I was like, what in the world? This was way before I became an agent. And I was like, why would you water down your I mean, like your books are way spicier if you're indie books. And they're like, well, we really like doing it this way because then we don't have to think of new material. And I'm like, really? But for all its liberalism. If you follow editors or, anybody in the publishing world, I'm not anybody because that's just really generalizing, but um there are a lot. If you watch some of the big names in publishing, they're very, like liberal minded people, but publishing is very conservative
Yeah.
on like when they put out books. It's very like in the romance genre anyway, they pull out a lot of those sex scenes, so a lot of that is just tamed down. It's watered or fade to black or whatever,
Yeah.
watered down, so to speak. And I guess that's because the United States, when it's, the original publishing country here in the US, we have such societal taboos about sex and talking about sex and not wanting to, like read about all that kind of
Well,
stuff.
but
So it,
don't you think there was a shift too? Because we had the boom of 50 Shades of Grey. So then after 50 Shades of Grey, we got Sparrow Beckett, we got Linda Eicher. We had these really, Lexi Blake, Shayla Black were publishing in the trad pub um, line. And
yes,
then I think as the dawning of the Me Too, and we saw this kind of conservative movement, in the country of as a whole, that we kind of started to pull back on sexuality. But on
mhm,
the other hand, we also started to see publishing put out queer books and more authors of color. There still is some big holes that we're not filling. Um, but yeah, I mean, I look at it as publishing itself. The head money guys are still white men
yes. Well,
and
with the
old.
exception of a couple of them. I
Yeah.
mean, well, I mean, I guess if you look at the board of directors, but like Madeline McIntosh, right? That's her first name. She just stepped down as the CEO of Penguin Random House, and
Yeah.
she's the white woman, but she just stepped down. So we still don't know who's taking her place, but I don't know who the chairman of the board is of that company.
Well, and they
Um,
just named an intern gentleman. He came over from UK publishing division of Penguin Random House to run the US division.
yeah, until they hire somebody or figure out what they're going to do with that
Yeah.
house. But he's not white.
No, he isn't.
Mm-mm.
But he's
Um,
for money because if you look at his UK lineage,
Well, yes. But then I think there's, Source Books is female owned. Um,
except, okay, so there's a misnomer on source books. They are 49% owned by Penguin Random House.
yes. Now that just happened in the last few years, but originally, yes,
Well,
she still owns the majority.
yeah, it's interesting because, people have this conversation and they're like, "No, Sourcebooks is this great space." And they are a great space. They are putting more indie market books
Hmm.
to into trad pub, but they still are ruled by some of the trad pub rules because they have, the ownership that is.
Right. And there's, let me see. I don't know. There's publishing has changed so much in the last, well, 7 years, going on 7 years that I've owned this company. It has really, they've taken a huge strides to diversify who's running which imprint, bringing on new imprints, opening new publishing houses. There's Black Odyssey that is owned by a Black woman, and that publishing house is going to be making some big splashes the next year or
Well, and
so.
you have Entangled that is now moving over into fantasy with their Red Tower,
Red Tower.
Red
Hmm.
Tower grouping. And
And
I
that's
think
female.
that's female owned, and
Mhm.
it's interesting. The whole thing is interesting. I find it interesting.
Yes,
Um,
this side of publishing is definitely, it's just it's you watch the players, you kind of see what's going on, who's where, who's doing what's happening here, there, and the other place. I mean, even especially as an agent, because you have to know where to send your people and
right.
what book is supposed to be right for which editor, excuse me, which house is going to do best by them, all that kind of stuff. So it's different. So my job is watching, a lot of that kind of stuff. What's happening, what's
I love the daily Publishers Weekly emails and like to see who's moving and who, because it's like its own little gossip epicenter.
yes.
I love
That's
it.
exactly right. Yeah. You want to know what's going on in the publishing world. Yeah,
Yes, I
that's
love
where
it.
it's at.
I love it. I told my husband, I said, I bought the subscription to be able to see the deals. Part of that is I want to see what books we should be anticipating for the future, but also I'm freaking nosy. I
Just
am
like,
nosy as heck.
I want to know what's going on. Yes, it's kind of funny because there are just some days where I just sit here and I'm just like at my desk and I shake my head because I'm just kind of like, really,
Um,
you know, like,
no, I have this, you know what? It's so interesting because I'm not an agent, but I work within publishing and I shake my head and be like, what? What are you doing?
right?
Oh, what,
Exactly.
why? Um, okay, so on the website, guys, in our show notes, I will list like the different things like queries, advances, and royalties, how publishing works for indie, because I want to get to some of these other questions that were asked.
Yes. Sorry, we
Um,
could talk about this stuff for days.
no, and I probably will be like, "Hey, Stephanie, you want to come back and hang out? I got more questions." This is like you are feeding my soul right now. Because I try to have these conversations with my husband. I don't know how it is for you. I try to have these conversations like things that I read that are happening in publishing, or I was on a webinar and had a conference call and I heard some things and I had to tell somebody, but I'm not allowed to tell anybody.
Uh-huh.
So I try to have these conversations with my husband, who is super smart. He is the head of like an IT system administrator, director guy at a university, like super smart. He does not care.
He doesn't care.
He
Exactly.
doesn't
My
care.
husband's like, what?
Yeah.
What? What are you talking about?
I
Yeah,
was like,
well,
it was a 7-figure deal for 2 books that have been out for like 5 years. And he's like, great. I'm like,
right. Well, that's how I felt. Okay, gossip time. That's how I felt when Sylvia Day got that 7-figure deal for a novella. I'm
yeah,
like, a novella? It's like 20,000 words. What's she getting 7 figures for a novella? I think it was a little bit more than that when it finally came out, but
yeah,
like seven. I mean, yes, I know she'll bring it in. It's her name, but 7 figures?
yeah.
Where
No?
can I find Sylvia Day? You know,
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
that
I
sounds terrible. Really? That I mean,
But
you
no, but you
know,
see the bonkers because it was announced that Mariana Zapata, she sold 2 books. 2 books that have been out since 2019 and 2020. And they are long ass books. I think there are 140,000 words in each of those books. And um, she got 7 figures for 2 books that have been sitting in Kindle Unlimited that are always constantly recommended and constantly high up on the Amazon list when they were in Kindle and stuff like that. And it's like, who are you selling these books to? Because if people wanted to read them, they read them already.
right?
So why are we doing 7 figures on this? So I want to
Well,
dissect that with somebody, but half the time my husband is like, great.
well, that's the what we talked about this before the show, and that uh, there's like two different types of readers, right? So there's those of us that read electronically, and then there's those that read in print.
Yeah.
And that deal is a print deal. So her stuff is going to be published in bookstores
I think it's a
versus,
full right deal because they took them out of Kindle Unlimited.
right, the ebooks too,
Yeah.
which, it's totally fine. But a traditional publisher is not they don't care about ebooks.
Right.
Never have. They will put them out there because that's what the market is for some, but their big thing is print sales.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I was just on
so
a webinar with one of my publishers that I work for a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about the phasing away of mass market and going to trade size because they want the display space in Target and
yes.
that's going to create a quandary. So I mostly work in category romance. And so that creates a quandary for category. And we have seen some category, like Penguin Random House had Love Swept as
Mm-hmm.
an e-book only category, and it defunct and they got rid of it. And although they're still
And it's
selling
not like they
books.
weren't making money. They
No,
had to have been making money because they had freaking phenomenal author lists.
well, and they still won't because so we Sawyer Bennett and Kelly Jameson are both friends of the podcast. And we ask both of them all the time, when can we get those in paperback? And they're like, you guys keep buying them. You
They
keep
won't give them the
recommending
rights back
them.
because they're
They
making
will.
them too much money.
They will
Yeah.
not sell us our rights back, so stop buying them. But please keep buying them.
Right. It's a catch 22. Yes,
Yeah.
there's a couple of my authors that I have that are love swept people, and they're just now trying to get some of their rights back for books that are still lingering there because they have a minimum that they have to make less than in a certain amount of time before they can get their rights back.
Yeah.
And if they make $1 more than that, the publishing house can say, nope, sorry, you made too much money. I'm not going to give you your rights back. So then you have to wait another cycle or two because sometimes it takes 6 months, not just 3, in order for them to see whether or not they want to give you your money, your books back. So it's really, I mean, they're making money off of it too. So it's not like
Right.
nobody's losing really anything except for the author. It's like, well, I can't really do anything with these suckers, and you're not promoting them. So why can't I have my rights back? You
Right.
know?
Right. No, it's so interesting because a lot of us in our ebook readers, in 2010, I got my first ebook reader because I had littles and I used to have stacks of books everywhere. And my husband was like, I'm buying you an e-reader because we need to move on from books everywhere. And because, then we had toys everywhere in 2010. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went to e-reader and now I am 99.9% exclusive in e-reader.
Mm-hmm.
The only time I read a paperback is if a galley is sent to me and I don't have a
Right? You don't have a
choice.
choice. You got to read the thing. Yes.
That's the only time. Okay, so some of the questions that have come up, and we've kind of hinted at a little bit, but I'm going to go through my list and we'll get through them. Um, so when would an author sell their audio rights? So this is an interesting thing, especially when there are these boutique audio production companies that you hire to do all the production, but you then own the rights, still own the audio rights. But
Right.
we are seeing that there are authors that are selling their audio rights to Podium, to Tantor, to Audible. Why would an author, what's the benefit of making that kind of choice? Money.
Money. It costs about, depending on the narrator, anywhere from say 250 to 450 per finished hour for narration. And that does not include engineering or mastering or proofing or any of that stuff. That's just the narrator fee. So, depending on how long your book is, I have an author whose one of her novels is 20 hours long.
Okay.
Even at $250 an hour, who can afford that?
Right. No, yeah.
So I mean, because a lot of indie authors are, well, there's more than there was before that are using their author income as their income. But it used to be just their secondary income and they would, use whatever. But so if it's their primary income, they can't afford to pay 20 hours at times $250,
Yeah.
plus extra money to master and proof and edit and all that kind of stuff. So it behooves them to license their work to a audiobook company who can fork that money out at the onset and then let them, because they can negotiate price better. They have studio booths in which the narrators can come in if they're local to them to record, so the narrator doesn't have to rent booth time if they don't have a soundproof room in their home. There's all kinds of stuff that goes into production. That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, we just did one. Well, we had Katie from Lyric Audio on a couple weeks ago, and she talked about just like where to listen, getting into audiobooks, and then last summer we had a couple narrators, and Katie from Lyric Audio Books came back on, and we talked about, because that was the whole, there was rumblings with some TikTokers that were thinking they were going to be groundbreaking and start an audio company, and
Yes.
that we all sat here and went,
Huh?
huh, huh. Um,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
So really, the choice to sell just comes down to feasibility of finances.
Yes. And a lot of my authors don't want to hear their words recorded. That they don't They're like, that's creepy. It skeeves me out. I don't want to hear it.
It's so funny.
Like, I don't want somebody to read my book to me. I don't know. Just take it. You listen to it. If it sounds okay, then you approve it. But I don't want to have anything to do with that. And so that's a whole another reason, because then somebody else is listening to it and
Yeah,
making sure that it sounds okay. But yes, and that's something else that they don't have to handle. Because when you're an indie author, you're doing every single thing yourself.
right, right.
And so realistically, licensing your audio is one less thing you have to worry about.
Yeah. Oh, I see the benefits in it. Okay, so another question that has come up when an author needs to sell international rights, and this is something I don't personally understand. So we have an indie author, they're in Kindle Unlimited, there is the ability for Amazon distribution of paperbacks. So if I'm a Kindle Unlimited author in the US, why would I sell UK rights for paperbacks of my books? Or Brazil, I see a ton of deals that are selling like some of them are where they're going to put it into the local language, like into Portuguese or whatever like that. But a lot of times it's just paperback distribution, not necessarily, um, you know, changing it into a different language. So why does that need to happen? What is the reasoning for that to happen?
Well, it doesn't necessarily need to happen, but it's kind of cool because UK is considered a foreign language because they spell things differently. And they, some of the words that they use are different than what we say a stroller, they say a pram. The heck is a pram? I don't know. But it's a stroller,
Yeah.
so okay. There are the little things like that that would have to be changed, maybe to make references, but it's considered to be a foreign right. So it's different because it's a different country, not necessarily a different language, but some things can change so that the people in that country understand that kind of term, right? Even though they probably read the American version. It's just like even like 50 Shades of Grey or like This Man, Jodi Ellen Malpas is British and her
Right.
books are written in British English. Her foreign right is American publishing it, so she has a house in England and then she has a house here. Just like my favorite paranormal writer has a house here and she has a house in England. But so the rights are sold because they're similar but slightly different.
So it really
So
comes
that
down to
can,
translation.
yes. Yeah.
Be-
And they can put it in paperbacks in their stores because it's a different language, different copyright, different owner of copy, same owner of copyright, but different distribution. So it's not going to mess up the Kindle Unlimited program.
okay.
And it's can be in stores like Waterstone or wherever because the publishing house can put it there. Whereas here, yes, they can put it through Ingram Spark or they can do it through Amazon. Um, not all the time as an indie author, you're not guaranteed you're going to be picked up to be put in a bookstore,
Yeah.
especially if you're not most likely 99% unlikely to get in a bookstore if you publish your book through Amazon
But yeah, through
print wise.
KDP.
If
Yeah.
you do it through Ingram, there is a higher percentage of being able to get into a bookstore because that's where they buy
Well,
theirs.
but that also comes down to like if you take back
Right.
returns and
One of my clients, it hasn't been announced in the deals because there hasn't been more than 3 people to announce this yet, but it is public knowledge. One of my clients just signed a paperback distribution deal with so Meredith Wild, who owns Waterhouse.
yeah.
She has a new imprint called Page and Vine. And my author just signed her print distribution rights over to Page and Vine for 2 of her books, 2 novels, and then they will publish a novella this fall. And she was on the bestsellers list in Ingram. She has books in bookstores, but her ebooks are in Kindle Unlimited. And she maintains those ebook rights. But Meredith bought or acquired the
Well,
paperback.
and she's done that a lot with Waterstone Press too. Bought
Or Waterhouse,
or
yes.
Waterhouse or whatever. Um, does, and you might not know this, and so my husband's family is Australian, and they were
Okay.
telling me how expensive paperbacks are into Australia. Like a paperback can sometimes be 50 US dollars.
Yeah.
It's super expensive, especially if it's not one that has Australian rights, that it comes
Right.
down to taxes and printing. So that's, I guess, another reason then that an author would choose to sell those like Commonwealth rights, um, to
Yes.
lower the price, accessibility for their readers.
Right. And it's, I mean, also too, there also is that language deal too, because it's Commonwealth English instead of American. And so that, but yes, most definitely. It's
Oh, I'm convinced the Australian family does not speak English. I can't understand them. Well, the women, I can totally understand all the women. The guys,
no idea. No clue.
they start saying the slang, and I'm like,
Would you
husband,
speak English?
husband, come talk to cousins, because I don't know.
I don't know what you're talking about. Somebody, yeah, I need a translator, please. Yes. Well, and then, and I think another part of your question, or at least before when we were emailing about foreign rights, kind of to segue into that, if you want to segue there. So that's a lot of what I do. For a lot of my indie authors is to sell the foreign rights of their books because readers are everywhere, and now
Right.
that they're not like, you might not have known. Oh, you probably do because you work for publishing houses, but the general reader may not have known that publishing houses have been selling foreign rights for ages, to other countries of the novels that they publish. So, and especially if they're bestsellers, they've been published everywhere. I mean, just like every dang day, Colleen Hoover is getting a new translation deal for like umpteen million books, like,
Right.
and I mean, good for her. She's going to probably be in every country that's on this planet,
Well, so this
She-
is something I thought was interesting because, and it kind of is along this lines. I noticed that Entangled recently sold the paperback rights to one of Rebecca Yaros's books over to an English to a British publishing house. So smaller presses wouldn't have the international distribution either. They would need to likely sell over to um into like Commonwealth and stuff like that too, right?
Yes, that is
Okay.
correct. And Entangled, I have a few authors that are published by them as well. And then they work with a literary agency in order to do those kind of things for their authors there. I do the foreign rights for my own clients, but and it could very well be that Rebecca's agent might have maintained those too. So she could have gotten that on their behalf for Rebecca. Um I don't know what her specific deal looks like or
Yeah.
whatever that says. But yeah, I mean it's
Well, I know for a while too, everybody was having problems getting print time and run times because there's only so many presses in the US and there was a paper shortage and uh distribution line disruptions and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So I know that,
Warehouse space. Mhm.
yeah, so I know that there are some smaller presses that have had to, some of their more popular books, they can't keep up with demand of print, and that's delayed. Like we've seen, several source book clients that their dates got pushed way back and they
Mhm.
still are kind of not sure when their next book is coming out because release dates have gotten pushed back because of getting press space.
Right. And then that's happened with Entangled as well. Like Avery Flynn had a couple of her, she writes, I don't know if I'm sure if you like rom-coms, you've
Yeah,
probably heard of Avery.
she's a
I
friend
know
of
that
ours. Yeah.
she's had a couple of dates pushed back with,
Yeah.
that she published through Entangled because there just was not space, or
Yeah.
paper, or they were, well, I think one of them she might have had to have made changes. I have no idea, but regardless, there was, sometimes there's just that it happens, the pushback of dates. But definitely with this whole paper shortage and the warehouse and employees, and since the pandemic, everything's been a cluster. So it's just
Yeah.
you just have to try your best and push. I had several foreign houses that pushed back publishing dates
Yeah.
because, well, especially like in Italy, because Italy, oh my gosh, they had to push back a bunch. And I mean, a lot, because their stores, their their country was closed for the longest time, and then
Yeah.
their stores were closed even longer. And in Europe, they rely a lot heavily on print because that's what they mostly read in
Yeah.
Europe is print. They don't haven't moved to the digital version, and much less they don't. Audio is like not a thing. I mean, they have it, but it's not a thing. You know, they
Yeah.
don't go for audio over there yet. And so I mean, they have short commutes relatively. Like they don't commute like we do here in the US. So
Right.
not long ones. I mean, there are some people that have to travel into the city. Like I have one of my agents lives out like 40 minutes outside of London, but she doesn't go to the city that often. But if she did, she'd take a train. She could listen to an audiobook, I guess.
Yeah.
But like if you had her e-reader but a paperback, you're still going to be taking your book. But anyway, whatever. They read a lot of print over there. And so they've had to push back a lot of dates as well because the pandemic. And they're still trying to catch up 3 years later.
Yeah. Yeah, we're all going to be catching up for a while.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that really prompted this was the recent indie author market. Mostly Kindle Unlimited authors have been getting these big distro deals with trade pub companies. Um, Many or traditional pub companies. Many of our listeners are confused as to what this means for these books from these authors. And I will say, some of the authors have not done a great job speaking to their reader base as to what's happening with their books, because it's part of that gray area that we all experience. And those of us that work in publishing, we're used to it. We're kind of used to the whisper around, but not no, but no. And I think that we're seeing a lot from from our listeners, that they are very confused. They try to ask, but authors aren't necessarily forthcoming with the information. And some of it could be that the author isn't quite sure yet, too. So, how does a reader know if these books will leave KU once an author has sold rights? What's an easy? Can you think of an easy way that a reader would have access to go and say, other than, because we have blatantly asked some of the authors, I mean, like, hey, is your book leaving KU? And they're like, I just sold paperback rights, but they never actually answer, no, my book's going to stay in KU.
Okay. Well, if they say they just sold paperback rights, then that means they retained their ebook rights, just like my author that I was talking about earlier, that sold her. So that particular author is Macaulay Smeltzer, and her Wildflower Duet will remain in Kindle Unlimited, and then the paperback version will be distributed through Page and Vine, which is has a print distribution deal through Simon and Schuster. So it'll be just the print will be distributed wide, and Macaulay maintains the ebook rights. So if they say they only sold paperback rights, then the author maintains the ebook and can put them wherever they want to. So if they've been solely a KU author, I would say it's pretty safe to say it's going to stay there. If they are one of those authors that fluctuate between moving back and forth, then it's still going to be back and forth because that's just what their plan is for the ebook. But the print will be more widely available because they're sold it as a print distribution deal, and what that means is that the publishing house is going to push it out to what we call box stores.
Well, not just box stores, but indie bookstores. That's something people
Right.
don't really think about. Indie bookstores are not necessarily a friend of the indie author. There's a lot of
Yes.
risk and there's a lot of expense to take on an indie author and shelve them in your small bookstore because people don't know about them. So they're not coming in looking for them. And
Right. And
so,
you don't have a big house to say, this is great. You should read this book. This needs to be on your shelf. You need to put this here,
right.
there, or
Or
everywhere.
pricing
And
deals.
then,
Pricing deals. Here, look, we're going to send you 25 copies at this price. And so they're going to make a bigger profit margin. So by an author selling those rights, they do kind of now have this ability to go into your local bookstore.
sorry, my son just came
It's okay.
downstairs.
It's fine.
He shares my office with me. Anyway, yeah, it makes a huge difference for the author because it gives them like I was telling Becky before the show started, there are some readers, and I know this for a fact because my mother is married to one of them. There are some readers that will only buy books out of a bookstore because they think that's the only legitimate author that there is. Okay. There are some, again, my mother is married to one, that will only read authors that have made New York Times bestsellers list because that's the quote, only legitimate author there is. Okay, whatever, dude. Anyway, I'm just like, okay, what,
Yeah.
what, where did you come up with that? Because that is so untrue, but okay, whatever. I mean, I spent, I don't know how much, that's a whole other conversation, a whole other episode. But I spent a whole conversation with him about why
It,
he should expand his horizons
it's
outside the New York Times
interesting
bestsellers list.
because I think that there are some traditional authors like Brandon Sanderson that is like kind of shaking up the market a little bit. Even Colleen Hoover
Yeah.
herself, she is shaking the market because she was the KU indie author and slowly built a fan base, and boom, now she's everywhere. Um, okay, so next question. Are these types of deals, so big pub sh- shopping, the indie author, KU author, to find their next lines of sales? So do you think this is maybe going to become the trend to querying versus, you know, traditionally we would have queried the manuscript, publishing would have come back and said, yes, here's an advance, finish writing the book, make these changes, we're publishing. Now it seems that some of the trad pub is saying, hey, these books are already written and edited. We're going to shop in Kindle Unlimited. And there's really not a lot of risk for them because they know they're getting an author with a fan base already.
That is true. And um so we had talked about before the show about how like readers these days, so before Kindle Unlimited was a thing, back in the day. Most of the stuff everybody could buy everywhere, on all platforms, ebook. Of course, print was limited to buying on Amazon, just like it is now, mostly for indie authors. And then traditional was still limited, like stores and all that kind of stuff. And then they came up with the KU program. Um, but before KU was a thing, publishing has been through this already, and it's funny how came back to this wave. So in about 2012, 2013, there was a wave of indie authors that hit lists left and right, became New York Times, USA Today bestsellers, uh, excuse me, hit Wall Street Journal. They hit all the lists because they were selling crap tons of books. And so Trad Pub was scrounging to pick up these authors because they were like, oh my gosh, they're making all this money. They've sold all these great books. We need to have them in our house. About 90+% of those authors have their rights back now for those books because it just didn't work out the way. And they didn't start out as trad authors. They were indie authors and then had such great success in a short amount of time, and they were excited that a house came to pick them up. I think now it's sort of the same thing. There's authors having great success in KU. They're seeing that they have this fan base, they have readers that want them, and they want to try their hat at seeing what they're going to do in the market. But the difference is now, I think the majority of the people that they're picking up have been around a while and aren't going to fall for that. This is the traditional deal kind of, like, I'm still going to have to market and maintain my reader base and still publish books while the traditional house takes care of these books over here. I'm going to continue to stay in my lane and keep moving on because that's the only way that they're going to maintain that reader base. Because if they just leave it up to the publishing house, they're not going to know where to find their reader base, right? That's what happened, I think, in 2013 because they didn't understand they needed to keep on that indie focused track instead of moving to the trad track, which is totally different.
It's very different. So if an author has a large established reader base and is already very successful, so I'll just use her as an example, Lucy Score per se. She has a small indie label that she has several authors that are part of. and she employs 10 people full time, like livable full time wages. Highly successful. You know, she just built a big, like, $1 million home outside Philadelphia. Um, highly, highly
Wow.
successful. If someone is that established, what is the value for someone like that to sell like their paperback distribution? Because she did. She has almost sold her entire back
Back.
list of paperback distribution. Why? Like, you, is it just so it's one thing off your plate?
No, I don't think so. I think for the most part, the majority of authors are like you and me, Becky, and we're readers first and foremost when it comes to like books. And um y'all that are listening to this can't see this, but behind Becky are bookshelves of books in her room. I mean, like
Yeah.
four bookshelves, at least four bookshelves that I can see of books.
This is
And
not
we
even a
as
fraction.
readers collect books. Like I have a whole library. I was on a conference call earlier today and I mentioned that my husband built me a library in my office and they're like, "No way." So I took my laptop and walked over to my office and showed my library. That I read only on my Kindle, but I have a freaking library
We
in my
call them our
office.
trophies. There
That's
are book
right.
book trophies.
So I mean, how many people go to Barnes and Noble just to go and look around?
Yeah.
I mean, every author, I mean, like, I don't know any of them that wouldn't trip over themselves to see their name, their words, their book in a bookstore. And we've mentioned before, and as an indie author, it's very, very, very difficult to get a wide distribution on an indie book anywhere in the US because they don't know that they have that backing. Like how does a bookstore know that this little author they've never heard of really has a reader base to maintain shelf space in their store?
Yeah.
And if it's coming from a big house like Shabbat Schuster, Penguin Random House, Macmillan, Hachette, Source, like all of these companies, they're going to know that they have this backing, that it's really meant to be something because they've proven themselves, right? So that's the difference between the marketing or that part of the marketing side of the business and the indie author doesn't have as much money to throw at because a lot of these spaces too in some of the bookstores cost extra money.
Right.
If you want to
Right.
be
To get the end
featured
cap.
on a particular table or an end cap or somewhere special in a Barnes and Noble, then you had to pay extra for that. Well, an indie author's not going to have the
Or the Barnes and Noble edition with a special paperback or extra swag in it, or the Target edition with a different cover. And so, I mean, yes, there are,
red-lined pages or gold
yeah,
pages or whatever that kind of stuff is. And that can only be done by a publisher because they have unlimited amount of money that they can, I mean, not unlimited, but you know what I'm saying? Like they have a way bigger budget that they can do that with. And with an author they know is going to be like Lucy that will sell like hotcakes, they can afford to put her into stuff. So it behooves her, to put it in there because once she gets floor space, table space,
yeah.
whatever, but she also finds new to her readers because there are still people out there, like my mother's husband, that will only read it if it comes from a bookstore,
No, I get it. Yeah.
so it's not like they're selling themselves short because they're not. They're just expanding their reader base to others that they might not be able to reach because and they all can't see me, but I'm holding up my Kindle. Like they don't do the ebook. They like that paper in their hand and they go to the actual physical bookstore to pick it up.
Well, and it's so funny because I'm a little older and I see all of these younger readers now like hating on Amazon, which is fine. They're not perfect. I mean, capitalism, yay.
Right.
Um, and they're like, but Barnes and Noble is the savior. I am a child. I was a young adult in the 90s. And for us, Barnes and Noble was the villain because they were coming into our towns and putting our small mom and pop bookstores
Bookstores,
out of
yeah.
business.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so funny to me because, you know, But it's new reader bases, Barnes and Noble, because it's not on Amazon, even though she is an Amazon author. Now she can also be a Barnes and have books in Barnes and Noble. So,
Yeah, Books a Million, indie bookstores. I mean, it's not just limited to that, but yes, I mean, I just say Books Barnes and Noble because I was just in, well, I should probably say Books a Million because I was just in Books a Million the other day, and she had several books, source books, had lots of their Bloom imprint
yeah.
books on a particular shelf in the store, and I was looking at the shelf and I was like, I wonder how much that costs.
Nope.
That's terrible. But really, on this side of the business, you know those kind of things. So you're looking at it and you're like, dang, how much did they pay for that positioning? Because it's like right inside the front door. You had to pass by it to get to all the other books. And I'm like, dang, blame. Where?
Nope. I have same thoughts. I have same thoughts. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next half of our little bit of things, buzzing about romance business. Okay, so it's that time, everyone, for our book of the week. Okay, Stephanie. Yay! I mean, Leah's usually with me, and she does jazz hands, and we have a fake echo because my production guy, he won't get us an echo. It's like week 7,000 asking for an echo. No echo. It's fine. So I'll tell you my book of the week while you figure out yours. So my book of the week is I recently did a reread of Major Misconduct by Kelly Jamieson. We're gonna do a series review of her Chicago Aces, and this is one of the original series that I read that made me fall in love with hockey romance. Kelly and Sawyer Bennett are like my go-to must-read hockey authors. So, and that book was published in 2015. Totally still holds up. Like, so good. It's teammate's best friend, our teammate's little sister. It's so good. Anyway, so Stephanie, what's your book of the week?
It's kind of funny that you say that because one of my authors was published at the same time at Hockey Book.
You have to tell me. Well, you can tell me who it is, and then I can.
Yeah, well, so I have two that write hockey. The one that I was talking about is R.C. Stevens,
I have not read them.
and she has two hockey series. The first book is published by Entangled. Entangled. It's called Big Stick, and then
Oh,
there's
I think I've
two
read
more
that
books. Yeah,
because I've
and
read most everything Entangled has
there you
published.
go.
I have
That
a
came
good
out.
relationship with Liz and Avery, and
Oh yes, so that I think came out in 2018. I want to say 17
okay.
or 18. And then she has a new one, a new series called it's the Westfall U series. It's all hockey. And then I have another author, Stacy Lynn, that has
We love Stacey Lynn. She's got her new Vegas series that is really good, and now I think she's going back to write football.
she is.
Yeah. We
She's like,
featured
they
her.
might hate me. I was like, Stacy, you have proven that you can write football. Okay. Like
Yeah.
everybody still requests that series. Everybody loves those guys in your football series. It's not, they
She
don't.
can do it.
Yeah.
She has one of the best secret baby romances. Well, it's Baby on the Doorstep in her hockey series. That's her Carolina hockey series. That's so good.
Yes.
Because
I love
he's
her. I
anyway.
hate that I can't review them anymore. I'm like, I love you as a client, but I hate that I can't review your works anymore.
That's fair.
And
So
for
what's
those of you that ask why is a conflict of interest, it's against FTC rule guidelines and rules that the Federal Trade Commission. I can't because I make money from her books, the sale of her books as her agent. Then I can't review her stuff. It's conflict of interest.
yeah, it is that's and so like for me as a copy editor, there are certain books I'm not allowed to talk about because
Yeah,
I
I have
can't.
a vested interest in that book.
I can't. Um, okay, so what book have you read recently that you think other people should give a give a try to?
Yeah, that was hard because I have read so many books lately. And I was looking through my Kindle and I was like, oh, this series is a good one. So lately I've been in this huge RH like kick. And if you don't know what RH is, it's reverse harem where you have one female and multiple men, more than two, is three or more. And so there's an author, it's relatively new. Her name is I'm probably going to butcher her name, but her name it's Crea Reitan, Crea Reitan. And she has a new series. It's called The Harem Project. And it's a really neat series. Like there's something going on in the girl's life. So far it's all been girls matched with, and the Harem Project is a group of either all guys, all girls, or a mixture of guys and girls, and they're looking for another person to add to their harem. And so the whole series is each, and it's different families. So you like, the first one is called the House of Demon. So you have, I mean, obviously demons.
Yeah,
And
demons.
then the next one is the House of Avis, and those they have angels. And then the next one is House of Wind, and they are fae. And then
Fun. So there's that paranormal piece to it.
yes, yes, but they don't.
Nice.
But all the so far, the girls have all been human.
Okay.
And there are some extra there are some human in the thing, but yeah. And then there's a suspense a little bit to it too, because there's an entity or two entities that are trying to kill off the unnatural, quote unquote, people. And so you have that kind of like scary, not really scary, but that factor of
Suspense.
there's these bad guys coming after my mates, and these are my people. And but it's not bad. It's not. I don't think anybody's going to be triggered by anything in here, in any of her stories. But yeah, so I've been, and I can actually review all of these books on my blog. So I've been reviewing them. But I have bought like her other, but it's like I like the way she writes, and I think all of her books are reverse harem. I don't know if this is like her or if this is a pen name of somebody else that has written, or is writing something else, because there's several of those out there too.
We have this conversation all the time. Like, this book for a debut is too good to. This has got
Right.
to be an
Just
author
be
for
a brand
something
new.
else.
Mhm.
We
Yes,
have,
but she does a good job. I mean, there are some things in there that like, but there's something in everybody's book.
yeah.
But yeah, I really like this series. And yeah, every time her PR people email about a new, upcoming release, I'm like, sign me up,
Sign me up,
sign
I'm
me up.
in. That's so great. Okay, so I'm going to give us some updates. So, Patreon update. We appreciate our Patreon supporters and would not be able to bring you the podcast without them. We currently have 4 open tiers. Hold on one second. Um, we currently have 4 open tiers, and those start as low as $5 a month and include membership to Drunk Book Club and other exclusive content. We reached our first goal of 40 Patreon members, and our next goal is 75. Once we reach 75, we are going to plan our first in-person readers retreat that will be exclusive for our listening community. We're able to bring you 3 episodes a week due to our amazing Patreon community. And we have other perks like Coffee of the Month Club, exclusive episodes, and Drunk Book Club. Our big goal is to reach 500 Patreon members so I can quit my day job. We have Drunk
That
Book,
would be nice.
right? We have Drunk Book Club coming in March. It is happening on March 11th at 9 p.m. And we are reading Adrift by Swati M.H. And Swati will be joining us for the evening. You can find a list of all of our upcoming dates, including book clubs, happy hours, plot a book, and reading challenges at bookcaseandcoffee.com/events. And then one small programming note. For Quick Shot listeners, Leah and I are reading The Perfect Gentleman series by Shayla Black and Lexi Blake. The first episode dropped on February the 14th. This is a 5-book series with an overarching plot, and they are romantic suspense. We will be spoiling them, but you can read along with us. Check out the website for the full drop date schedule.
I love those ladies.
Oh my gosh. Have you read this series, The Perfect Gentleman? It's the 6 prep school friends that one dies in book 1, and they all have these different like kind of high value careers. One is the president of the United States, one is his chief of staff. There's like a naval officer, a CIA agent, and then the owner of an aeronautics company.
Mm-hmm. I've read
And
them separately. I just haven't read them together. But I love both of them. I've met them.
yeah.
I love them both. Like Shayla. I mean, I've read more of her stuff than I have of Lexi's, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm obsessed with her Menage, both of their Menage series, and even The The Masters and Mercenary from Lexi, but also
Yeah.
Butterfly Bayou. I love them both. And part of our goal in 2023 as a podcast is to read more backlist.
Mm.
We've spent the last 3 years of the podcast kind of chasing the new releases and the new sought after. And I'm finding that some of our listeners are newer to romance. They only picked romance up in 2020. And so there's all these great books that were written before 2020 that we
Yes.
don't talk about as much. And so,
Because we've already read them. But that's a key thing, is to
right.
bring them back to life. Their
Yeah.
backlist is always.
Right. Like if you really loved Sarah Kate's Praise, which is a current hot sex club romance series, then you should read Stacey Kennedy's Club Sin or Sawyer Bennett's Wicked Horse. We've read them as longtime readers, but they might not be on newer authors or newer readers' radars. So that's kind of our goal in 2023 is backlists. That's what we're doing.
Yes. Makes sense to me.
Anyway,
There's
Stephanie,
plenty out there.
thank you so much for giving us your time and coming on and answering all of our rights and publishing questions that our community has had. We really appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Until next time, everyone, happy reading.
Find us on Instagram at Buzzing About Romance or on Twitter at Buzzing Romance. If you like the podcast, please leave a review. If you'd like to support us directly, join the Bookcase and Coffee Patreon and receive exclusive content only available to Patreon members. Check out bookcaseandcoffee.com for our on-the-shelf show notes.